Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, we are at Lancaster County Timber Frame with Josh Coleman and Michael Eenigenburg. Am I close? It's so. Tell me about your backgrounds.
Mike here. I went to Williamson Trade School for education and really fell in love with carpentry and building things, and kind of you had two paths to go when you graduate, either to do finish work or to do framing and structural work, and timber framing was kind of the perfect marrying of the two.
Right.
You know, you get the structural aspects of the building, and it's all exposed, so you get the finished work as well.
Still get it pretty.
Yeah. So after graduating, we found a timber frame shop and just started timber framing, and have been doing that ever since then.
Oh, very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my name is Josh Coleman. I went to school at Messiah College for mechanical engineering. And when I graduated college, I was like three options. You know, there's concrete, steel, or wood. So really, I had done carpentry as a boy with my dad, and really thought that was the direction I wanted to go. And then I had a friend who was into timber framing up in Maine, so I got the bug from him. And then pretty much right out of college, I started working here and started in the shop for a few years, but then ended up in the design office. So.
I think that's interesting. We were chatting before we started recording about a project that we had worked on together, and somebody that we had worked for our company at the time. And one of the things that Flynn had said to me after he left our company to move to Colorado was that one of the reasons that they kept him on the architectural firm that he was working on during the Great Recession was because he actually understood how to build things that he was designing, and it helped. So I'm sure you have that help then too. With having worked in the shop, you have an understanding.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
We actually sort of encourage all of our designers to go and put their frames together, so they can get to see the consequences of their choices. And improve. Good feedback.
No, I think that's really a good way to understand the consequences of your choices, because there's sometimes that we look at prints and we're like, there's no way that's going to work, and then you have to kind of work through how it could work. Yeah. So what drew you into timber framing, traditional building?
I really liked the simplicity of it. Like if you're gonna build a joint that has to stay together, everything you have is right there in your timbers.
Right.
It's not like you have to go out and get this Simpson product with these kind of screws, and it just gets very complicated with all the regulations that are out there right now. So instead, we'll just make one mortise here, we'll put a tenon on that side, and the peg holds it together. It's just very
the way it's been for thousands of years.
Right. It's simple, it's elegant, it looks nice.
Yeah.
Everything is just like everything about it.
Yeah. And I would just say, like, on top of that, like, the connection is exposed but almost celebrated in the context that, like, what we're shooting for is this sort of higher level of craftsmanship that that people appreciate and understand and value. So
Yeah.
it's neat that your work is exposed and
Everybody
not
can
kind
see
of
it.
buried
Yeah.
inside the wall.
Yeah, that's very true. And most framing is hidden. You don't
Right,
ever see
yeah.
it. So that's very true. So tell me about Lancaster County timber frames, your types of projects, all the things that you can tell me about it.
Sure. Well, we started primarily as residential and very much more traditional mortise and
Mhm.
joinery. And then over the years, we've sort of branched out in different directions. So we got into a lot of commercial work. You mentioned the recession. That was like our saving grace. We had enough commercial work that carried us through that
Yeah.
low time.
Yeah,
And
that we found the same thing where we had to pivot kind of to work on public projects like
sure.
universities or for the government. Yeah.
Yeah, and that opened up some opportunities for us, and as we grew, and then that kind of led to some covered bridge work with PennDOT and Lancaster County. That's been a lot of fun because it's a really great blend of the traditional mortise and tenon joinery we use every day, but kind of like that bigger scale, exciting project, and then the historic rehabilitation, restoration aspect of it. It's like just a great blend of all those things we're interested in.
Well, when you're doing the bridge work, I actually just saw a Facebook post yesterday where they were discussing a bridge that had got knocked off of its piers, and I don't know, I don't think it was, I don't know if you were involved with that, but do you have to then make sure that like the connections and things are to like modern code when you go back to do that?
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of engineering firms that get involved and make sure. It's funny. So the one bridge, the first one we did, literally was not anchored down at all, and when the floodwaters came up, it just floated away.
Floated it. Oh goodness.
So they do that a little differently now, so that it's anchored down. You don't lose it.
Right. You're not getting up wondering where the bridge went. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I know we have to deal with, and I'm sure you do too, but like the existing building code and then changing when you're changing the usage of a building, then you have to meet the modern code. So I'm sure you have to deal with a lot of that with your just dealing with timbers and even like existing timbers. You probably
yeah, especially when we're reusing for rehabilitating barn structures. The just historically undersized compared to modern code requirements and different uses. So like just rafter sizes and beam sizes can be troublesome. We've done a lot in the way of sort of designing reinforcement that goes up inside the hidden ceiling above the beams to basically keep the original look, but support it in sneaky ways that you can't see.
Yes. So what types of project or what geographic areas do you serve? Or do you
most of our markets the Northeast. I would say primarily PA, Maryland, and New Jersey, but we have gone some far-flung places, out to New Mexico and down to Florida.
Oh my goodness, timber framing in New Mexico.
Yeah, it was a neat opportunity, and it happened quite a while ago. But, we were thankful for that chance.
Oh,
it was
yes.
up on a mountain.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
It was good for everybody.
Yeah, that would be a I could see that in the mountains. I was imagining like in the desert, like a timber frame on an adobe house. So, and then do you do a combination of residential and commercial work now?
Yeah, it's a pretty even blend.
And so do you have notable projects that you'd like to share?
Well, I'll just brag on Mike. He worked at the Cloverfields, what's it called? Cloverfields Preservation Foundation. This is a plantation that they're restoring down in Eastern Shore of Maryland.
Okay.
So they're going like full restoration to a specific date in 1740 something. And so Mike was down there and reproduced the sort of original joinery that they suspect happened in the original build. There was an old kitchen that had been demolished, 100 years ago, and they're rebuilding it the way it was. And so that was a really neat experience to be involved in that. I mentioned the covered bridges. We do lots in Lancaster County and Chester County. we did some work on the Gettysburg Visitor Center,
Oh, yes.
which is just a lot of people get to see it, so it's kind of fun.
Is that when that they just redid? Not
Yeah,
just a couple of years ago.
it
Yeah.
was yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe in 2006 or 7.
Okay.
But,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I was there since then because I had never been impressed with the cyclorama before then,
right.
and now that they've like done it, I'm like, oh, this is really cool.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty neat.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, one other one that was a lot of fun. We did lock gates for the C&O Canal down on the Potomac
Yeah.
River. So we pulled out the old gates and recreated them from scratch, and then installed them, and they're operational now. So it's really neat to be part of that.
And were they how did they operate? Were they wooden like locks?
Yeah,
Or?
so the way
Okay.
that works, there's masonry walls, but then the actual gates that hold the water
Mhm.
back are timber,
Okay.
and then they have valves, and then that open and let the water levels change in the
Oh,
locks.
very cool.
So
Yeah.
it's just a fun experience too, because these huge gates are gigantic, and then but there's a long lever arm, and you can just kind of push it.
Mhm.
And if they're balanced right, it's really actually pretty easy to move. So it's kind of a
Oh, yeah.
gratifying experience
Yeah,
to close
to
a
be able to move these giant.
doors. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It was nice to take the old parts, the old gates apart and see the old joinery.
Oh, yes, yeah,
And then try and recreate that into the new ones that we made.
yeah.
And it's nice working on projects like this that people have seen as beautiful and useful, and then they want to recreate them.
Yes, yes,
So
yeah.
it's nice to think that some of the work that we do would someday be seen as valuable, and then somebody want to
Right, recreate it, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you. Have you ever found like joinery that like was completely unusual or that you hadn't seen before? Or does that happen
Mhm.
often?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example.
There's always a bit of forensics when you're like taking something apart and like,
Yes.
what did they do here? And what
Why
does
did they
this
do
mean?
it? Yeah.
So we're always sort of trying to understand and interpret. And many times there's like a little shoulder or bearing surface that was concealed, but it turns out like it was really smart to put that there in the way it supported the structure.
Right.
And we hadn't even realized it was in there.
More surprising is the mistakes that we see that they just patch and put over, and
Yes.
you never notice until you're looking at it. Like, why is that hole there? And then it's just a
Yeah.
mistake that they filled in.
Yeah, they weren't perfect either. Oh. So, what challenges or trends do you see in traditional building?
Well, I do think.
Oh, did you? Sorry.
That's right. I do think like the green building and all the LEED
Yeah.
certification has been good for our business. Just promoting sustainable materials such as timber
Yeah.
has been really interesting, and they're doing some pushing the limits really with a lot of the glue lam and laminated stuff. We've got into that a little bit, but even just solids on timbers with traditional joinery. We see a lot of reclaimed timbers being reused in a more really ultra modern setting too. So like there's this juxtaposition of materials, and it's kind of fun to be part of those kinds of projects.
That sounds interesting. When you're doing like glue lamps and those kind of themes, does that hurt? Like when you then have to cut in for the joinery, or do you not cut into those?
There's definitely different rules that apply to those, but we work with our structural engineers to make sure what we're doing.
You might have to do metal connections or.
We have gotten into a good bit of steel and bolted connections for that kind of product.
So. I often try to point out from a preservation standpoint that there is like a huge intersect between green building and preservation that I don't think either like group really like tries to talk to the other one about.
Sure,
but if you already have an existing building, reusing it is much greener than tearing it down and building a new one. And and that understanding that, I think sometimes people just want a green building, and if it so I think that's definitely, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that that's something that people need to kind of expand what their idea of green is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because my argument is that I don't think a product's green if it breaks and you have to throw it away. Like, if it can't be repaired,
Right,
it's
right.
not really green.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll get off my soapbox and let
No,
you
no,
guys
it's
talk.
No, right there with you. I mean, just thinking about the fact that we're using timbers that were around 150 years ago,
Oh, yeah.
and they're still going,
Yeah.
continue to
And that
function.
lumber, we don't have lumber that's equal to that now.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, really. We have some good lumber, but it's not equal to the old growth.
Right.
So, is there anything that you wanted to share that maybe I forgot to ask you about before we kind of get into wrapping up? Okay. Are you usually quiet?
Yes.
I would just say that we really enjoy what we do. It's so much fun to work together and problem solve the structural challenges, and then work with the homeowners to develop the aesthetic design that they're looking for, and then the craftsmanship that we put into it and get the highlight and have people appreciate. So it's pretty gratifying. It's a lot of fun.
We've worked on one project with you, and I was impressed with your efficiency. I know that you probably are always looking for ways to become more efficient, but
Sure.
the timber frame got assembled here, got brought out to the job site, and it was up in 2 or 3 days.
Right.
That just amazed me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yes. So did you have any offers for our listeners? I didn't know if you have any seminars or anything that you're doing. I know with everything that's going on, there's not much happening.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
necessarily.
Okay.
We do have a book that we put
Okay,
together.
sure.
It's called Heavy Timber Structures, and it highlights the use of timber material in mostly commercial projects. But the authors are Tony Zaya and Tim Diener. They both work here. Tony's one of the founding members, and so yeah, we're really proud of that. It's got some really neat projects.
Okay, very good. I will make sure that there's a link to that. Is it on your website or is it on Amazon?
You can get it on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that there's a link to that on our website.
Wonderful.
And how can our listeners contact you?
I would say the best way is our website, which is you can just Google Lancaster County timber frames, or the website is lancotf.com, which is LANCOTF as in timberframe.com.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.